Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Facebook Live conversation with the Brown Girls Guide to Politics. I'm Ashanti Golar, the founder of the Brown Girls Guide, and I am so excited today to talk to three amazing Latina leaders from Arizona. If you already don't know these women, you are going to fall in love with them by the end of this conversation. We're not only going to talk about the amazing things that they do as leaders, but we also have a very important conversation topic today, and that is about schools reopening across the country. And we know we are definitely not where we need to be yet, so we're going to talk to them about what they're seeing in Arizona, in their communities, in the Latino community, and how do we fix it? So I'm going to have the fabulous women introduce themselves first. We will go ahead and start with State Senator Rios.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Rios. I'm here in the State Senate in Arizona. I've actually had the good fortune of being in the legislature in Arizona since I was very young. I started back in 1995, so it's enabled me to see a lot of change and the lack of progress that we hope to change once Biden becomes president and Democrats control the legislature here. But I've worked in both the House and the Senate in a variety of issues, been in leadership positions, was last term the minority leader in the House, and just really excited to see the political landscape changing and our future changing, quite honestly.
So the state senator and I were able to chat earlier, and I was just telling her I love her trajectory, the fact that she went into higher office. That is something that we always love to see. And next, we will hear from Coconino County Treasurer Sarah Benatar.
Thank you. So I have been serving as the county treasurer in Coconino County since 2014, 6 years. I came in this fairly young, I was 27, but I love what I do. I get the opportunity to really make a difference in every aspect of local government. So we work very closely with our school districts, fire districts, public safety, hospital districts. And so it's been so rewarding to be able to work with them and make sure that they have the resources that they need so that they can provide the services that are so desperately needed, especially here in Arizona. Our schools really need all the help that they can get. And it's just been honestly the honor of the lifetime to do and be able to do what I have been doing the last couple years.
Yes, 27. I want to note that for all of our young women who are listening, because I get that all the time. I'm too young. Like, no, you're not. You're be not. Like Sarah. Be like Sarah. And my emerged sister, January Contreras, who I just love and adore, and who I know is going to be in political office one day. Separate conversation. I won't do that to her today. She knows how hype I get. But January, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ashanti. I'm really glad to be here with you, Ashanti, for, thanks for making this space to uplift women of color. I've loved that. And with Rebecca Rios and Sarah Benatar, two women that I know who have provided really inspirational leadership here in Arizona. So I'm a fourth generation Arizonan. I'm a lawyer. I have had the privilege of spending all of my career in public service, either in the nonprofit legal world or in government, and worked for Governor Napolitano and Secretary Napolitano in healthcare, and was by her side throughout the H1N1 swine flu breakout that we had in 2009. And so from that experience, and having watched how we handled that within the Obama administration, the Obama-Biden administration, and comparing it and rooting for this administration to do better, because we all want that. It's been tough, but we're here all as public servants. We serve in different ways, but I'm glad that we're talking about this today, because Arizona families, as I'm sure many are all around the country, are really hurting with this.
And this was definitely embedded in everything that you all talked about in your intros, is public service, community service. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but you all chose politics. So I do want to start, because this still is the Brown Girls Guide to Politics. I want everyone to hear what made you go on this political path. Why do this political leadership, servant leadership? Because again, we're still in a day and age where a lot of our brown girls still don't think this is for them. So tell us a little bit about why politics.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think for me, it was two-part. Quite honestly, I grew up in a very political family, and then my father was in the legislature. So I spent the weekends passing out flyers and asking people to vote for my dad. It was not a normal childhood, but I thought it was. That coupled with, once I graduated from ASU and I went to school, got my master's degree in social work, my goal was to help children and families. And after working in the system for a while, I recognized that the change needed to occur from the top down, that it was policy issues at the department level that were really hampering our ability to help children and families. So I decided to run for the legislature at the age of 27 and to make a difference, right? To ensure that families and children have the basics that they needed, be it healthcare, quality education. And when I say that I've seen the lack of progress, I think the fact of the matter is, for many of us, it's been frustrating that we've been in a state here in Arizona that has been largely controlled by one party, with a brief, time where we were lucky enough to have a Democratic governor with Governor Napolitano. But because of that, what I find is, 20 years later, we're still fighting the same fights for basic health care, for adequate school funding. And what we see now with this pandemic is those issues exacerbate what's going on. The lack of funding, the lack of investment on those two issues alone, particularly in minority communities, have really exacerbated the problem that we're seeing now with COVID. So I'll pass on the mic.
I can go.
All right, January.
Public service, it's really, for me, when I was growing up, we just had some of the challenges that a lot of people have in their homes. In terms of, my mom's second marriage had brought some substance abuse and some family violence into our lives. And for me, those days of making it through that time just embedded me, once we were on the other side of that, a real sense of obligation to all the people and the forces that helped me get through those times, to really try to be that for other people, and just feeling not like a choice, but that is my duty. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's how I became a prosecutor in the first place, a county attorney and an assistant AG. And public service is just, it's one of those things where it's all about how do you make us stronger all together, or it should be, right? I mean, that's what's so hard about when we see, leaders being elected who either it's more about, their own personal success, it's about, profit for those around them. The rules apply to everyone else except, their own circle. That's tough to watch, especially when you grew up, believing in public service and having this real ideal about what it means. So, all the way from, you can look at any job I've had, including the current one, running a legal aid center. And it's just always been about, how do we make people stronger, because making people stronger makes our community stronger.
And I'll jump in. For me, I'm a first generation born in this country. My mom came here and my family from Guatemala in the 80s when there was civil war going on in Guatemala. And you're growing up in a household in where the culture is to give back, is to care for those around you. That just really inspired me growing up. And, like January talked about, the struggles in your own family life. So my dad passed away when I was 2, and my mom raised 2 kids on her own. And that was something that you got to see firsthand, just how much wrong there was, all the corruption that was happening, how things were, programs meant to help those get through difficult times were not really doing what they were supposed to. So, after college, and I had always wanted to give back. And that was something that was just ingrained my whole life from my mom, is there's always going to be those who are less fortunate than us. And it's so important that you give back. And that's what I wanted to dedicate my life to. And so I've been in public service, worked for nonprofits. And when the opportunity came, to go for county treasurer, for me, it was, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And I decided to do it. I care so much about this community and want to make a difference in everyone's lives. And this was really, for me, how I felt the best way to do it. It's so important that we see, Latinas, women of color, people who look like us, who can share our stories, representing us and making these decisions. Because if you can't relate and you don't understand where someone comes from, then how can I expect you to make the right choice for me and to represent me? And we've been in a state, Senator Rios mentioned it, we've been in a state that's been run by one party, and not a lot has been done to really help those who really need it. So that's why I decided to run, and I've never regretted that decision.
I have all the feelings. I just love it. Y'all are so inspiring. So I do want to get to our topic at hand. And today we're going to talk about the reopening of schools in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And I really want for us to talk about this from the various perspectives that you all bring. It's a reason why we wanted to have you as moms, as advocates for public schools, for community leaders. So I want to start with, what are you hearing on the ground from the community about how Trump has handled the pandemic?
I'll go ahead and start. I think what I have seen is, quite honestly, a lot of confusion. People are confused at the politicization of the issue. I think folks are confused because they don't see the president and even the governor of our state leading with science. And then they're left to believe what they're hearing on talk radio or from the neighbors. And so again, I think that this lack of really Trump taking control of the issue, leading with science, has had a devastating effect on communities. I think that has even continued to play out locally in Arizona, where again, we have a governor that is very close to Trump. He brags about having his personal cell phone play, here comes, I forgot what, Hail to the Chief or something when the president calls him. They are very tight. And so subsequently, we have a governor that, quite honestly, when the heat was on to try and do something, take control of this, he abdicated responsibility because he was not willing to make the tough decisions. So he abdicated responsibility to the local mayors. And thank God, right? Because what we saw were 3 very strong women mayors: Mayor of Phoenix, Mayor of Tucson, Mayor of Flagstaff, Kate Gallego, Regina Romero, Coral Evans, take charge and say, we need to have masks. So they were able to pick up the ball where both Trump and our local governor were unwilling to. But subsequently, again, then it becomes a political issue, right? Where a lot of, I think, some of our friends on the Republican side see this as, oh, well, Democrats are overreacting because they're not getting clear messages from the top. And so I think it has had a devastating effect here. And it led to Arizona seeing a tremendous spike in cases, to the point where finally, the governor said, okay, we'll close the nightclubs in Scottsdale. I mean, it had to get that bad before he would even close nightclubs. So now we are starting to see the numbers slowly starting to descend. But again, I think that puts a very false sense of security in people's minds that, okay, now everything is okay. And so I think many people are bracing for potentially a second wave. And so all of that goes back to the fact that with Trump, his lack of leadership, his ability to lead with science and facts has had a devastating effect on the entire country and in Arizona. I mean, we have lost hundreds of folks, and we have thousands of cases of COVID that continues every day. I think we had over 500 new cases today, over 15 new deaths today. And again, that is on a daily basis. So his lack of leadership has cost us dearly.
And I'll add to that, what I'm hearing has been his lack of leadership has cost dearly lives, livelihoods, and our children's future. You know, from talking to educators, talking to families, they're struggling. And it's because there was a lack of leadership. That the way Trump handled this pandemic was he turned it political, and it should have never been that way. We're talking about people's lives. We shouldn't be having this discussion right now. Truly, we shouldn't. And so much could have been done. And here we are 6 months later, and nothing truly has been done from the Trump administration. We're still struggling. Families are still struggling. And instead of taking responsibility and choosing to listen to the experts, the Trump administration is refusing to do that. Things are not well. Families are not doing great. The economy is not doing great. I was talking to a superintendent of schools, one of our school districts this week, and his response is, where are we going to get money to pay for bills when we now have to have all these new expenses with COVID? And we have to think more than just today. We have to think about what this is going to look like with flu season and when it's cold in the wintertime. What's the impact going to be? And so you just hear it firsthand, and it's so heartbreaking. And I have nothing to say besides the Trump administration has just failed America. And he has no leadership. He just doesn't.
I mean, I think just adding to what Rebecca and Sarah said, which does capture it, you know, in Arizona, we were making international news for weeks. And, you know, so it was very hard. You know, you get it. New York, they had the first outbreak. They were learning on their feet as they were to respond. But I think what hurt for so many of us is that we had time to prepare. The White House had time. By the time we had our peak, they knew what kind of policies should be put in place. And it feels like, you know, because of politics that the steps weren't taken. And instead you have a president who says, you know, I asked them to delay testing. And so I think what's been interesting to me is, you know, the independent and the Republican voters out there, my colleagues, my friends, people who have supported me politically, where they drew the line was, okay, incompetence, okay, we get that, let's get better. But when it started to be, you know, we're going to take hospital data away from CDC, you know, away from these people, sort of like hiding data, tweaking data, you know, behind the scenes coming out and saying, I asked for testing to be delayed. You know, when people start to see hinky stuff like that, then it becomes painfully obvious, even if you're trying to think the best, that this has become a political game for someone. And they're not thinking about my family. You know, in Arizona, Latino and Native American families have been hit the hardest. And, you know, I myself in my family was personally affected by COVID. It's real. It's scary. And I think more people get that now, the longer the pandemic is going on. And, you know, they're not just disappointed, but I think a lot of people feel betrayed by the Trump administration.
everything so well said. I know I definitely feel betrayed. Like, you know, we unfortunately knew we were not going to get the leadership that we needed and deserved out of him when it came to handling this pandemic. But I am grateful for all of the women leaders, for the women elected leaders who have given us the things that we need to keep our community safe, to give them that support. But to our topic at hand, let's talk about schools reopening, because when it comes to schools reopening, we know that many classrooms are still empty, and that's from kindergarten all the way to college campuses. What has been the impact on the Arizona community and the Latino community just with schools and education, which is something that we know is so important for our communities?
I'll go ahead and jump in. You know, specifically when we talk about the Latino community and Arizona, about 30% of our population are Latinos. What we found, especially in the early days, was a complete lack of testing, right? We had folks literally waiting in their cars in line for 8 to 10 hours in 110-degree weather. We have communities in Maricopa County, which is our most populous county, one little town that's called, it's named Guadalupe, and it is Latinos and Pascuayakis. And what we found was the infection rate amongst that community was 5 times the average of the state. And they were not being given the information they needed. They were not being given the testing they needed. The fact of the matter was that many of these people were essential workers, right? A lot of our people of color are the essential workers putting themselves on the front line. This is also a lower socioeconomic community, so you had multi-generations living together. And so right from the outset, I think that set back our communities of color. Now that we are looking at sending children back to school, again, I think that we are hampered in Arizona by a lack of a clear direction. As of today, the news said Maricopa County has met 3 metrics where kids can go back to school in person. Well, I know as a parent of a 3rd grader and a junior in high school, I don't feel confident about that. And that again is based on the fact that in Arizona, we have ranked near the bottom in terms of funding our schools and paying our teachers for literally the last 2 decades. And so you're telling me as a parent that we're going to be able to socially distance kids when I know as a legislator that we've got 35 kids crammed in a classroom because we're not giving adequate funding. We need a leader like Biden that recognizes that funding is going to be critical if we're going to send kids back to school in a safe setting. You know, when we look at how some of the families in my district are struggling to deal with, you know, online learning in school, I had a parent that had 2 children and there was no computer in the house. So they were trying to do their homework on the mother's phone. I mean, that is the sad reality that a lot of the families in this community have been facing. And so even though they're saying, yeah, you can go back to school now, nothing has really changed in terms of having leadership that ensures that we've got adequate testing and PPE. And so I believe it creates, again, a false sense of security. And you have a lot of confusion here in Arizona because the media is saying, oh, schools can open back up safely. And yet a lot of other people saying, but what has actually changed? So I think that, again, is what I'm hearing from folks is that confusion and then folks being polarized based on their political affiliation. And that is really dangerous. And that's what happens, right? When you don't have a clear leader that says, look, this isn't about politics, this is about science, and that's what we're basing decisions on. And that is lacking in Arizona.
January, Sarah, have anything you want to add?
Yeah, you know, Latinos across the country are suffering and at a higher risk of getting sick with COVID. And that goes for all people of color. And that is something that families are scared of. They don't want to send their children back to school right now because, yes, numbers are going down, but we're much higher. The numbers are higher now than they were when we did close in March. So even though you're decreasing, a percentage of a high number is still a high number. And so we still have a lot of cases going on and families are scared. And again, we don't have a leader at the White House, and we don't have a leader at the state capitol and the governor's office who are taking the necessary steps for Arizona children and families. Every school district was pretty much on their own of deciding how they were going to address opening up schools. How are they going to find the funding to provide PPE for teachers, educators? How are they going to provide a quality education to children and families when there are inequalities right now between families? Like Rebecca said, access to the internet. Here in Flagstaff, there was a lot of GoFundMe pages trying to raise money to help pay the $20 fees for children to get an iPad so they can do their homework because they don't have access to a tablet they're doing, or even an iPhone. So it's a struggle. And we need a leader like Joe Biden who can make a national plan, provide our educators, provide our families with the resources they need so our children can be successful. We talk about summer loss that's already happening. I can't even imagine what this is going to look like, 5-10 years from now, when we're looking at what did 2020 and honestly 2021 at the rate we're going, what impact did that have on children? That summer loss is just continuing into the school year because, again, we don't have a leader in the White House who's doing what needs to be done to protect American families.
And so I'm the mom of a junior in high school and a college freshman. And so, we told our incoming freshmen, here's all the things that worry us, but we will let you make this decision. And, he watched this and said, literally, I don't think this virus is going to be going in the right direction until there's a new president. And I think he's right. And so he chose to start from home, from online. And so he's still going to the university that he chose, go Wildcats, but he's doing it from home. Now, my junior in high school, we just had open house last night, right, online. And it's just a window into how hard it is, on the students, but also the educators. You could just hear it in the presentation. And so we know they all want to be back in the classroom, as do my sons. But we also know, the Biden-Harris team have it right when the first point in their school reopening plan is get this virus under control. Because nothing happens until there is actual planning and execution of those plans to actually get the virus under control. And once we do that is when we can start talking about schools need more funding, they need PPE, they need more technology. We need to figure out how do you really, really make learning work in this tough environment of being away from in-person school, and close that equity gap that my friends here already talked about very passionately. So, it comes back to that first point though, which is let's get this virus under control. And I think most people do put politics aside and say, we're only going to get through this with leadership that actually knows what they're doing and has the wherewithal to put actions in place to stop the virus. And, having worked in the Obama-Biden administration, when we were working H1N1, which turned out nothing like this, it did not flare into this huge outbreak, we were working nonstop. And there was so much coordination with local government and state government. And I think, at the end of the day, when there's some postmortem on all the things that were inadequate and wrong about the Trump administration response, they're going to find that lack of coordination and taking things seriously and putting human life first, that's really probably the biggest failure that happened.
Yes, that postmortem is going to be lots and lots and lots of pages. So a series of things that went wrong, but all of you are very right. We don't have the leadership in the Trump administration, and Vice President Biden, he has already shown leadership that Trump hasn't. And we know that because he's released his simple yet effective 5-step roadmap to safely reopen schools. And I really want to highlight that because it encompasses so many of the things that you all said that we need. So to direct FEMA to make sure that our K through 12 schools get full access to disaster relief and emergency assistance fund under the Stafford Act, to make sure that PPE and sanitation supplies for schools qualify as emergency protective measures with full eligibility for federal assistance, to work with leaders in Congress to pass an emergency package for schools so they have all the resources they need, to provide money for ventilation and other health measures, but also more money to hire teachers to keep classes small and socially distanced, and for more psychologists and counselors to support our kids' mental health, which is something no one's like really talking about, that mental impact, and to close the COVID-19 educational equity gap that has widened for low-income students and students of color. And I know, like Yvonne mentioned so many things, but what in that plan speaks to you? And I know for me, I just love the fact that he has a plan. The fact that he's not even our president yet, but he knows what we need to do in order to get this under control. And that is so nice to have a thoughtful, compassionate, smart leader who is really looking out for everyone.
You know, all of his steps are so critical and so important. And you mentioned them and it's like, yes, yes, right? And some of them are so obvious. We need to get control of it first, right? But I think what speaks most to me as a mother and a social worker is the resources into the schools. And of course, it's to make sure that, you know, budgets aren't blown out and teachers are let go. That is also critical. And to make sure that this gap that's occurring between our low-income students because they don't have the resources they need to learn at home, that is closed. But I think for me, the fact that he recognizes it's broader, that we do need to ensure there's mental health counselors and psychologists because there is something occurring that we don't even know, right? In the state of Arizona, what we have seen is the number of referrals to our child protective services system have gone down, but removals of children from their home have gone up. The fact of the matter is a lot of children were not in safe situations, but they couldn't go anywhere where there were eyes on them, a teacher, a nurse, to ensure they were protected. And that, as a social worker, as a mother, that scares the heck out of me. That coupled with the fact that we don't know what all these children are going through. They have parents that are stressed out, they've lost jobs, they may have lost a loved one, and the psychological effects are going to last forever. And if we are not able to identify those children and take care of those children, then this tragedy that didn't need to get this far out of hand will continue on for a lifetime. And so for me, just the fact that he recognizes the resources that are needed to go into a school and that it means so much more, right, than just getting computers, that this will have an impact on children and on families. And at the end of the day, he cares. And that's what this plan, I think, says to me and why it resonates so deeply with me.
I agree. It's, you know, Rebecca, everything you say, I completely agree with. His plan, I mean, it's so refreshing to have a leader who has a plan right now. And he's so much more of a leader than Trump is. And he recognizes the struggles that families and children are facing right now. I have a 16-month-old, and you think about even on children that young, how much they're missing out on, you know, just the connection when you if you're walking and you see some, we're all wearing face masks right now. You're missing on a lot of these developmental opportunities, and even our younger children. And you think about then as you go into school age children and even our college students, they are struggling emotionally, physically, economically. We have nothing to compare this to. We really don't. As a country, as we've never experienced something like this. And to hear Biden talking about in his plan, making sure that there's counselors for our students and our children, and recognizing that our behavioral health is so important to our survival. Again, that's refreshing. You don't hear that. And so he recognizes that we need help, and help is more than, as you said, Rebecca, just a laptop or a computer. It's overall, how can we help you? So then that way, again, we're not creating a much bigger issue that we're going to see 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now in our children because they didn't get the help they needed. So for me, what speaks to me the most is truly how Biden wants to provide for the overall health of our children and our country. That's a true leader. He cares. He cares about my well-being. He cares about your well-being, cares about my baby's well-being. It's so amazing to know that we have the opportunity to put Biden in the White House and to have a leader at the top who cares about every single one of us and will do what needs to be done to take care of our future. So, yeah.
And I mean, I think Rebecca and Sarah covered really important parts. And the only thing I would add is that, a President Biden understands the mechanics. And it's not that hard to understand, but for whatever reason, whether it's lack of experience, lack of knowledge, or just the wrong priorities, the Trump administration has not used the mechanics that exist in federal government to actually create a super strong response to a pandemic, to a national crisis like the one we're in. And so I think it's a matter of the wrong priorities. So we watched this administration, they went quickly to give contracts to friends, to, do bailouts that really protected, important parts of our sector, but don't recognize that education is the backbone of our country, just as much as an airline industry, quite frankly, more. This is the education of our future generations, not to mention that, every parent that has a child at home, we're watching this, and we know that the schools and educators need more resources to actually create, high quality learning in this pandemic. So I think for me, seeing that, yes, they get FEMA and the Stafford Act, and there's funding there to be used in a national crisis, and that they're ready to acknowledge the pandemic is the worst crisis that we've had in our lifetime in terms of taking human life, and that they're bringing in experienced people, not just lobbyists and people who come in with an agenda other than serving the public. And quite frankly, I think that's just one of the biggest differences between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is Joe Biden has spent his lifetime serving the public, serving others. He surrounds himself with people who are committed to public service, to serving others. And that's who we're going to see, in full force come back into the federal government. And their eyes are going to be, on what Napolitano taught me, which is, what is it we can do today that makes us stronger tomorrow? And I know that is what the Biden administration will be working towards every day.
I feel that is the perfect way for us to end with those amazing words, January. So thank you, January. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Sarah, for your leadership, everything that you do, for spending time with us today, sharing your words of wisdom and why it's so important for us to elect Vice President Biden and Senator Harris. to everyone watching. Again, follow these women. I told you they were phenomenal, just total badasses. And I thank you all for joining us. And we'll be having more of these conversations about the 2020 election and why it's important for us to get out there, vote, and make sure that we have a Biden-Harris administration. Thank you all so much. Enjoy your afternoon or your evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.